Yes, this is based on little Bobby tables. And let me tell you how I got to this point. So I worked as a Python developer for 3 years at Oklahoma 7-Eleven Corporation and did a lot of ETL and ad hoc reporting, things like that, worked with MySQL. And I consider myself at this point an intermediate MySQL user. I've seen a lot in these last 3 years that I've used it, but by no means do I know go deeply on it. So still learning a lot there. I decided to jump at an opportunity last summer, and I now work at Paycom, and I'm in application security. So an entirely new field. I always tried to be secure in my programming as much as I could learn and what people would tell me, but I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went until I took this job. And it's been a crash course learning, and it'll curl your toes, definitely. So this cartoon is somewhat famous. It's by XKCD. Just keep reminding me. I'll just keep coming back. All right. How's that? So the little Bobby tables, and I'll just read it out here to y'all. Hi, this is your son's school. We're having some computer trouble. And the mom on the phone says, oh dear, did he break something? The school says, in a way. And the school asks, did you really name your son Robert, single quote, right parentheses, semicolon, space drop, table, students, semicolon, space, dash, dash, space? And the mom says, oh yes, little Bobby Tables we call him. The school says, well, we've lost this year's student records. Hope you're happy. To which the mom replies, and I hope you've learned to sanitize your database inputs. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I could make this pop on a web app. And so what I've done is I've developed a little web app in Python. I've used the Cherry Pie module as the logic on the back end. Okay, so it will be serving the web app. And I created a very, very simple database table for student information. Bobby's in there. I called him Robert. And what we're going to do is I will show you how we can extract information out of the tables. First, before I do anything else, if you want to try to replicate this at home, go to github.com, mcstargazer/Bobby. And the code is available out there for you to use. All right. So down here in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, I've got a command line. I'm using Ubuntu 18.04 LTS as my operating system. Over here on the right-hand side, I've got the actual Python code, so the entire application fits into a single script. And I'll just briefly look at the Python because this is focused on SQL. And finally, over here, you'll see that I'm pointing to the service right here, data portal. So quickly over here in the Python, I'm using Python 2.7, and I'm using an older module called MySQLDB. As time goes on, the modules are getting more secure, and people are thinking about security more. They're starting to design frameworks that keep you secure as you go along, make you think about security, and you can't think enough about it. So keep that in mind. If you're not mildly paranoid, you should be. Not too much. You want to be productive, right? Just enough. All right. So I won't focus too much on this stuff. What I want to focus on is right here. Okay. If not safer, and there's a reason I say that, I'm never going to declare this code safe. You want to do security in layers, okay? Defense in depth. And this is just one layer of many that should be done to secure this app. So if not safer, then do the following. And here's the SQL statement. And I pass the first name right into that SQL statement, and I execute it. And there's a problem with that, because I can put unsanitized, untrusted user input into the text box, and when I hit enter and it sends it off to the server, weird things can happen. All right, down here below, else, okay, so if I've got if not safer, do the bad stuff, else do the better stuff. I'm not going to declare it safe. But in here, here's my SQL statement, and here I do what's called a parameterization. So I pass it the SQL string, Whoa, undo that. And then out here, I have what's called a Python tuple that gets passed in, and that parameterizes the query. So the very first thing that we want to do is make sure that we're set to safer equals false. Because we all want to see the table pop, right? Okay. So safer is set to false. That means I have to save it, and when I do so, you'll notice on the lower left-hand quadrant, the server will restart in case some informational messages went by there. So now we're started in not safer mode, and at the very bottom of this code, I have 3 suggested payloads. Payload 0, 1, and 2. There's actually a 4th one that we'll try right here. So the person that programmed this, they thought to themselves, I know what, we'll have this super secret way to get information about students. We'll use their first name. That's the first fail. Print info to screen, and there's entry number 7 on the database table, Bobby. Tables. Info about this student, watch out for the mom. She's been in trouble before. Okay. When we're dealing with information security, we want to take care of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And I'm going to break all 3 right here with this code. So let's return to the data portal. And now I'm going to break confidentiality. And before I do that, I want you to notice, go down to the lower left-hand corner of the screen. I have written out some Python code to spit out to the console what we're actually sending to the SQL interpreter. And by the way, this is called SQL injection, also known as SQLi. My full Python talk I called I Spy with my SQLi. Okay, so basically get in there and you can pull stuff out of the database table that the programmers never expected or wanted you to pull out. And so the original query here is right there. Select star from students where first equals, and where that %s is, I'm going to pass in Robert right here. And then you'll see the final query that got sent out is this one here on the bottom. So select star from students where, in parentheses, first equals, in single quotes, Robert. Now here's where things get interesting. I'm going to take this first suggested payload and stick it in up here. Fire it off, and I just broke confidentiality. Information for all the students came out. Okay? And if we look down here below at the code, you'll see why. The actual SQL that got sent is select star from students where first equals Robert, oh, but I sent it a tick mark and it closed off the context. So where first equals Robert or 1 equals 1. Well, 1 always equals 1. So it grabs everything in the database table. And notice I end it with a semicolon, so this statement is done. The database administrator enabled stacking on this, oops, so I can layer commands through the command line. And then right out here, I put a space, dash, space, octothorpe. There's your new word for the day. The octothorpe is the pound sign, also known as hashtag. So a dash space is a quote at the end of a SQL string in many languages, but you can also use a single octothorpe also to terminate a command on a single line and say, ignore everything afterwards. It's a comment. And so by putting that in there, we ignore everything else that was originally programmed by the programmer. All right, let's back up to the data portal. Let's try, we haven't done anything to destroy yet. We're to maim. We're going to maim at this point, and then we'll destroy. Okay. So here we're going to break integrity. We're going to mess the data up. We're going to basically say find students where student's name is null, and then we're going to terminate the command with a semicolon, and then we're going to update students, setting the first equal to red wherever last is hat. And there's both a black hat and a white hat. So when we're in security, we start talking about the white hats, the black hats, the blue team, the red team. White hat's the good guys, black hat's the bad guys, the red team is the bad team, the blue team's the defender, okay? And so you're attacking each other, okay? And if I hit print, what's going to happen here? Any guesses? There's no student name null or nothing, so it should not return any students. And the rest of the stuff kind of happened behind the scenes. Let's go back to the one that divulged everything in the table, and we'll see that now we've got red hat, red hat. So I was able to MAME the data. Okay, so we've broken confidentiality, we've broken integrity. All right. And by the way, if you go to the GitHub site that I showed you at first, it's got links to the XKCD comic, including descriptions of what the comic really means. And I have a lot of that coded into the Python, so you might get a laugh out of that if you enjoy XKCD. All right, are you ready to pop the table? Little Bobby. Okay, so we're going to ask the machine to return to us the record for Robert. We're there going to semicolon, so break out of the first command and stack another command, drop table students, semicolon, break out, and then provide a comment. So everything afterwards that the programmer tried to put in the SQL is going to be ignored. Okay? What's going to happen when I hit print info to screen? Will Robert show up? Yes. Yes, Robert will show up. Will the database be trashed? Yes. Or at least the table? Yes. Okay, so here we go. There's Robert. Well, everything's cool. Let's take a look at, let's see, who's another user? Danish is another user in here. Uh-oh. Internal error. Okay.
So are you suggesting that this is a website where people would be inputting information?
Correct. But this is very simplistic. People get sophisticated. And, you know, we've got people on the blue team trying to defend, and a lot of sites are hardened. But nevertheless, injection, all command injections are still the #1 issue in the OWASP top 10. OWASP website's out there at the GitHub site I gave you, okay? Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP. And the #1 for many, many years running is command injection. So I'm injecting SQL commands to the SQL interpreter, and then I'm breaking out of context and doing other things. I have seen crazy stuff. So I took a CTF. So I went through a lot of training, still training. I'll be training the rest of my life in this field. But the first month or two at Paycom, I did a lot of deep training, and I had to pass a CTF, a capture the flag. Within 2 hours of starting the CTF, I had achieved PHP command injection on the command line, and I was surfing the OS. Okay? So it's not just SQLi, it's also PHPi, it's HTMLi. I even saw one where we broke out of the CSS context. Yes, it's possible. And you're just like, what? So if you're not actively, proactively trying to code securely, start thinking about it, okay? All right, so we lost our database table. Guess what? I have a special hidden super secret website called ResetDB. Don't ever do that. There are lookup tables, automated. They just look for these things and find them, okay? You're human. Unless you're using truly random strings that are big, they're going to brute force hack through this kind of stuff. So don't do what I just did, okay? So this just reset the database, and it's there in the Python script. If you decide to download that, you can dig through it and find it. So return to data portal, and now Danish is in there. All right, any questions? Anybody want to try a payload off the cuff?
Quick question.
Yes.
In addition to sanitizing database inputs with parameters, which is probably the easiest way in code, what can you do outside of code?
Outside, okay, yeah. He's asking what other types of depth and defense in depth can you pull off, okay? So what I did here is I parameterized the query. You said something different. You said something about sanitizing the input, and from my perspective, I would say maybe whitelisting. I wouldn't allow update, for instance, to be inserted as a value in the string. So you've got sanitization of input, you've got parameterization of queries, You could also reorganize the code such that only one thing was spit out at a time, and that would limit the confidentiality. You would only have one come through at a time. You also would step over to the database administrator. You would not be able to stack commands. You would disable that. You would also have updated, and one of the big things that OWASP is always telling you, make sure that your packages and your software is up to date, your OS is up to date. I'm using an older version of a module that only installed on an older version of Python in order to get this to pop. Not saying it couldn't be done on the newer versions. Okay, I'll never say that because people are really clever. We've got my mentor on my team. I will stew on something and it's like, I smell something's wrong here. I just don't know how to do it. And he'll sit down and in 5 minutes it's popped. This guy's that good. He just thinks code. And so, once again, yeah, multiple layers of security that you want to try to achieve. And of course, I haven't even talked about firewalls yet. If somebody's hammering it, trying to brute force their way through with a password, you would probably want to disable that connection after 2 or 3 attempts. So there's lots of layers and things that you can do. And every one of them should be in place, just in case one fails. Yeah.
Add security by the user, because this
Yeah.
application needed to select, you didn't need to update. So the user never should have had update.
Correct. Yeah, the user in the DB administrator should not have granted that user update. Exactly correct. Yeah. Any other ideas?
How well does limiting characters?
People use it all the time. OWASP does not advocate it because a whitelist is much easier, saying what is allowed rather than what is not allowed, because characters, maybe a new character set would appear or something that the programmer didn't think about would appear. And so rather than proscribing stuff, it's better to say, well, this is what is allowed. So OWASP will advocate try the allow list first. Does that answer your question?
It answers a slightly different question than what I was asking.
Okay.
What I mean is limiting, say, input to 20 characters to make sure that you can't get out a whole phrase.
Absolutely. And OWASP standards also look at content and length, both of those, for input validation. All right, any other questions? I appreciate your comments, and if there's nothing further, it's good to meet y'all.